remember, I was a financial analyst. My job was to measure interest rate risk. That's what I did one week. The very next week, I'm a park ranger. And the squirrel jumped on me and climbed up my leg into my shorts. There was a young lady drove her car off of a cliff, and luckily it hit a tree before it went into the river. And it was quite the ordeal to save her life. Anytime someone is injured by an animal in a park, with big exceptions, of course, but situations like that, it's always the person doing something they shouldn't have done.
All right. Hey, Jody, welcome to the Tales from the Ship podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
I am fantastic, and I'm very excited to join you and have a great conversation.
I'm glad to have you here, Park Ranger. Don't know anything about it other than I've seen them. So beyond that, I really look forward to hearing everything you've got to say. Why don't you just tell us basically what does a park ranger do?
The best answer I ever heard to that question, I was traveling with another park ranger, and we stopped in a small town to get gas, and we went into the gas station and got snacks and drinks. And the young lady behind the counter seemed fascinated that two park rangers were in there. And she said, I've always wondered, what does a park ranger do? And before I could say anything, the other park ranger just simply said, we range, which seems like a joke to say we range, but that is an actual pretty good description of what a park ranger does. You will range through the park doing all sorts of things. I was a law enforcement ranger, so of course I had a lot of law enforcement duties to do, but there's so much more than that because you're answering questions, you're picking up litter, you're looking at the trees, even to see the health of them. You're watching for wildlife. You're answering questions as they come. You may be looking for people that have questions, and you'll go find them and answer them. You point to the bathroom a lot. That's a common question. Where's the bathroom? And also through the busy months, you're always looking for projects that need done that you certainly don't have time to do during the tourist season. And then in the shoulder seasons or the winter, if you're at a park that's not busy in the winter, that's when you do a lot of the project work. You fix things that either weather or visitors broke through the year. So being a park ranger is so full of a variety of things that you can make a plan of what you think your day will go like, and it never will. And you don't get a lot of the things done that you have on your list. But I had some wonderful jobs as a ranger, one of the best being the head ranger for the Centennial Trail in Spokane, Washington. And I rode my bike every day. And that was fabulous. You do bike patrol and you talk to people, and sure, you have to enforce laws, but it just was a great job. And then another thing a park ranger does is interpretation. You tell a lot of stories to help people learn about what they're seeing, what they're doing, why they're doing it, why things are the way they are. So it is just a fabulous job.
Yeah. Yeah. I think on the surface of it, when you say lots of different things, I think that's what makes a job interesting, that you're not building the same widget over and over, right? There's
Yeah,
a variety's the spice of life, as they say, right?
that's right. And there's so much variety as a park ranger. Every day is different.
So Jody, why did you decide to become a park ranger? How did that all go down?
Well, I loved being out in parks. I loved being with people. I loved recreating, but I was a financial analyst at a commercial bank. I did exactly what I went to school to do. And after some time, I just started to think, gosh, if I do my job really well, like excellent, who benefits? The shareholders, maybe. And I liked the work, but I didn't love the work. And then someone that I knew who worked for parks helped us move when we built a new house. And that day she said, we're hiring park rangers. I think you'd be a great park ranger. And I think that day, by the time I put that last box in my new house, I had already decided I'm going to be a park ranger. And that was it. It took a little while. I had to go back to school. I had 2 degrees, but not enough in natural sciences. So I had to go back to school for a little while before I was finally able to become a park ranger.
That's amazing how someone can just touch your life like that, just randomly, and all of a sudden that fork in the road goes like this.
Yeah, that's right. Just one almost innocent comment on one day changed everything.
Right. And if you had never run into that woman, you'd be in the banking still,
Yeah,
probably.
probably. Probably. It's true.
So how many years did you do park ranging?
I was
I'm
arranged
sorry.
for
Hold on a second. Let me is park rangering? What would be the verb of that?
I don't know, perhaps park rangering is more fitting than park ranging because I'm not a ranger anymore, but I could still go range a park. So perhaps park rangering.
Excellent. Okay, so how many years were you a park ranger?
8 years. 8 years, yeah. Yeah, it was good, and 4 years on one side of Washington State, 4 years on the other.
What do you think that, let's say day one, someone gets hired. What do you think might be something that would cause someone to maybe quit on day one? Anything?
I think there a couple of things looking back, I didn't realize. All right, so if you become a park ranger, you most likely think it's a chipmunk on your shoulder and hugging trees, things like that. Sure, there is part of that. But my very first day as a park ranger, someone drowned in the river. And I did not know that's the type of job I was signing up for. I guess if you think about it, of course, that's what you're signing up for. But I really had no idea. And I think it could be that sort of thing to realize what you think is a dream job of being outdoors and helping people quite often comes with some traumatic events and some bad things that happen, especially when you become a law enforcement ranger. You deal with things police officer would deal with. You're just dealing with it in the woods. So I think realizing that most parks get crowded, most parks, what you really deal with is people. I think it's that sort of thing where, okay, I took this job to be outdoors. And then quite often it's a job. It can be a job like any other job where you're dealing with people, you're dealing with grumpy people, you're dealing with coworkers you might or might not get along with, supervisors who might or might not be good. So there's elements that are just like any other job. You just have a really good view when you do it as a park
Yeah.
ranger.
Yeah. So I'm trying to picture the situation. If someone were to drown in a river, what's a park ranger's responsibility? I mean, we're talking body recovery, or to what extent are you involved with that?
Well, luckily for me that day, I was not actively involved in anything because it was my
Sure,
first
sure.
day. I did go on scene and watch what took place, but I was not involved in that. But there was a park ranger who actually when the incident happened gave CPR to the guy for about 10 to 15 minutes, which is an incredibly long time, and kept the heartbeat going until the helicopter arrived to airlift him to the hospital. And the gentleman ended up not making it anyway. But that park ranger, the dedication it took to do that. So park rangers can be involved in saving lives, body recovery, just you're involved in a lot of stuff. And me personally had not thought any of that through before becoming a park ranger. One day I'm sitting at a desk looking at spreadsheets, and the first day of my new job, someone drowns in the river. So it
Right.
was quite a wake up call to what the job would really be like.
So that means you have some sort of medical training. To what extent, or is it just basic medical training, or what do they have you learn?
Well, it depends. Some roles require more. For example, the National Park Service has backcountry park rangers where you are out by yourself for days at a time, just running into backpackers. That's the purpose of it. And they have to have a first wilderness first responder, which is just under EMT, to be able, if you find a hiker where something has happened, then you can actually do quite a bit of whatever they need. Almost every park ranger, though, has to be first aid certified. I went as far to become first responder certified, but then I let it expire and just went back to first aid. But that's the level you can expect from a park ranger is first
Okay.
aid certified.
Okay. Is it easy in the Washington national parks to maybe get turned around if you go for a hike? Maybe get kind of lose your orientation of where you're at, and if you're not prepared, then maybe you're in trouble.
Well, I think that can happen anywhere. That if the park is bigger, the most parks are really big. And if you're just not familiar with it and you're just not used to being out hiking, then it's really easy to get turned around. And there are some parks that just have, like Zion National Park has rangers that's their main thing that they do is they're part of search and rescue. And many of those cases can just be someone went out and they weren't used to it and they got turned around and now it's dark. They're not back at the campground and their family says, "Hey, I don't know where John went." And so then rangers will go out and help find them. So that it does happen quite a bit because it's really easy. Just imagine you're out for a hike and you're mesmerized by how beautiful everything is and you're not paying attention because you're looking at all the rocks and the scenery and now the sun's going down and you're like, "Oh no, I don't know which turn I took. I went off trail a little bit. I don't know where I'm at." And it's easier than you would think to get turned around and get lost.
How about any physical marks from your job? Scars, tattoos, habits, anything that you picked up on the way?
No, no tattoos for me. I have a couple of good scars. I have a good one on my arm from an incident while arresting somebody and I got cut. And
Really?
I have one on my wrist from doing some training, handcuff training, and it got out of hand and I got cut. And that was just with another ranger. And so it happens. You can't have a job that physical and not pick up a couple of scars. At least if you're doing your job right, you should get a couple of scars from the job.
Can you walk us through like what a typical shift would be like from the moment you're there, you arrive, where are you arriving? What do you do? Clocking in, I mean, how does it go? Can you just sort of break down how a day might go for you?
It will vary based on your role because different park rangers have different roles. An interpretive ranger is going to do things a lot different than a law enforcement ranger, and a campground ranger is going to do things different than a backcountry ranger. But let's stick with the campground because most people have camped in a park. Well, a campground ranger, usually when you get there, you'll check in at the ranger station, see what's going on, see if other staff have left you any notes. Maybe there's a couple of campsites that are of concern or might need attention or had a question that they need you to go check on. So that's where you might start at the ranger station. Perhaps there's a meeting. There's usually staff meetings once a week or so. So if that's going on, then you do that. And then after that, I guess that's when you start the ranging portion of being a park ranger. You start the range portion of your day where you probably then go to the campground and you might go through the campground on foot or on bike. I like both of those. Going through by truck isn't very effective. Now, some campgrounds and some parks are so big, you might have to do that. But if you go on bike or foot, then you're so approachable to everybody. If you're driving through the campground in your truck, rarely does anyone wave you down to ask a question. But if a camper sees a park ranger just walking by, people love park rangers. That's one of the great things about the job is it's to a lot of people, seeing a park ranger during your visit at a park is kind of like running into Mickey Mouse at Walt Disney World because it can be the highlight of a visit. And you see the campaign hat, the iconic park ranger hat, and people just love it. So you might walk the campground. First, you'll check in with the camp host. Most campgrounds have volunteer camp hosts who are staying there 30 or 60 days, and they work for free, but they get a great place to stay. And then they will also have a good idea of what's going on in the campground. Is there anything you need to do? The park ranger needs to do any sites that were perhaps trouble the night before that you need to visit, and then you just go out through the campground and answer questions. You might just stop by and say hi to people. You might hike some trails. Now, that's fun on its own, but also you hike the trail for maintenance purposes because if a tree has fallen, if there's some rocks that have fallen, you just need to be up to date with what's going on the trails. You might go find the seasonal staff and check in with them, see how they're doing. Do you need anything? And then it's that sort of spot checking throughout the park. That can be most of your day because it is very likely somewhere through all of that something comes up. You It might be a dog off leash. It might be you see someone fishing where they're not supposed to. It might be someone with alcohol where they're not supposed to. It could be someone harassing a harbor seal that's on the beach. You just don't know what's going to come up. So you think you know, oh, I'm going to go from the welcome station to the campground, but something could happen and you don't get to the campground for 3 hours. So that's kind of what it is like being a park ranger is you just show up prepared for whatever is going to happen that day. And there are days where not much goes on. And there are days where you at the end of the day you think I was occupied for 9 hours in my 8 hour shift. It's now 9 hours later and I don't feel like I did anything because so much kept coming up that needed my attention. I didn't do anything that I thought I was going to do today.
Yeah.
So there's
Really cool.
like an idea if you're a campground ranger of what it's like because things
Yeah.
just keep coming up over and over, and of course the role changes. If you've been to what was the last national park I was at was Joshua Tree National Park, and there are rangers that just work the welcome station the whole time. So all day long, cars come through. You look at their pass, you take their payment, and you hand them a map. Sometimes that's the whole job, and that's your whole day. But it just depends on the role. If you're an interpretive ranger, maybe you've got an interpretive hike in the morning and an interpretive talk in the evening or the afternoon. And other than that, you either perhaps work on developing your talks or you just hike the trails and answer questions. So it is such a wide variety of what a park ranger's day can look like.
Interesting. So, yeah, I wonder what asshole messes with a harbor seal. That sounds terrible.
My goodness, it happens. It
Okay,
happens.
I have some questions, some follow-up questions for you. So you're walking around, you said that the main question is where's the bathroom, but what are some of the other questions that people might hit you with?
Well, you'll get you'll get the question. So this, as a park ranger, it is. I like that you asked this because when you're new to a particular park, it's important then to get familiar with the birds, the trees, the plants, because you're going to get those questions. I saw this bird. What was it? There's that tree over there. What kind of tree is it? What kind of fern is it? You'll get that. All of those questions and then you have to realize people visit parks for their particular reason. And sometimes they visit parks for the history. And so perhaps they saw something and they want to know the story behind it. So as a ranger, you have to be familiar with the history aspect of your park as well. So those are I'll lump those in is that you'll get the natural questions or natural as in nature, trees, birds, animals, plants. You'll get history questions. You will get I'm here for 4 hours. What hike should I do? This is my first time here. What should I see? So you'll get those are the most common. And then depending on your park, there are maybe icons that people ask about every time. So if you're at Yosemite, for example, people are going to ask about El Capitan. They're going to ask about the waterfall. If you're at Yellowstone, people are going to want to know about Old Faithful, maybe the story behind Old Faithful Inn, Mammoth Hot Springs, of course, the wolves. So it will it will change based on, and then the Number one, this isn't a question, but I think over 8 years, I must have been, I heard this 200, 300 times easily. I always wanted to be a park ranger, but, and then what comes next might change. Their mother wanted them to be a dentist or who knows what else. But that is always one there. Someone will say, I always wanted to be a park ranger, but, and then they want to know your story of how you became a park ranger and what is it like. And a lot of the questions you're asking me, people, that was one of the fascinating things about the job is how much people thought about being a park ranger and wanted to know what it was like. And usually with them, I've given you some of the backstage things about it's not all as glamorous as it seems. But when someone brings it up like that, what's it like being a park ranger? They want to hear all the great things so they can daydream about, oh, if I'd only become a park ranger.
Yeah, right. I was playing with an eagle before I walked over here, and it was
That's
fantastic.
right.
So you had mentioned living in the park. Did do most of the park rangers live in the park, and is it free?
Many park rangers do, not all. I don't even know if to say most, it varies. And it is free in not quite. I mean, you have to contribute for utilities and things like that. Essentially, yeah. I mean, almost. And might it might be different agency to agency. Like Idaho might handle it different than Colorado and different than New Hampshire and then the National Park Service has their own thing. But the what you're doing in return is you're saying I'm on call all the time. And therefore, you can interrupt me anytime there's an issue in the park. You can call me 24 hours a day. That's what you're giving up in return for living in the park.
Yeah. Okay. Seems like it's like a fair trade to me, I guess. I mean, housing is very expensive, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you live in a park, you probably have a great view or at least really good recreation just walking out your front door.
I was wondering, you mentioned all these roles that a park ranger might have. Did you find that your employer made it easy to move into the roles that attracted you?
Well, I do. I think that's one of the really cool things about being a ranger is you can go to one park and for whatever reason decide that's this park isn't for me or it's too heavy in because maybe this park has a very small maintenance staff and the park rangers end up fixing everything and you're like gosh that's not really what I want to do and then you can transfer to another park fairly easily and so I think that's pretty unique that you can make a shift that drastically changes how you do your job and where you do your job, but you're still within the same organization and you're still part of the same group and family. And so that's pretty cool. But I think the smaller the park, the more general you have to be. The bigger the park, the more specialized you can be.
Hey, quick time out. If you made it this far in the video, then you must like it at least a little bit. If that's the case and you want to see more, then please like and subscribe, and I'll keep bringing you this content. And it helps YouTube figure out that people actually like this, and they'll send people this way, and we'll grow. With your help, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Could you tell us the worst day you ever had on the job? Which might be the drowning thing, but can you tell us the worst day and also maybe the best day?
Well, that's the thing. As a law enforcement ranger, you deal with some bad stuff. You deal with some bad people. You deal with bad situations. Anytime you deal with a death in the park, it's a bad day. There's just no way around it. It's going to affect you for a little while. Anytime you have to go hands on with someone, nobody really enjoys that. And so those lead to bad days. So that without going into details of situations, I'll just leave it at that. Like anytime you have to deal with what is someone else's worst day, it's usually probably a bad day for you too.
How
Yeah.
often did you have to go hands on with somebody in the
Well, it's not all that common. It's not like being a
Okay.
city officer. So it
Okay.
happens, yes, because people bring their problems into parks, but it's not like you're a city officer and it's common everyday occurrence. Yeah. But best days, my goodness, most days are filled with moments that you could say, this is fantastic. It could be an interpretive program that a kid is there and he's so delighted. You just feel that that kid's going to be a park ranger. That kid learning about salmon today, for example, that probably is going to change his path. That's pretty cool when you get to do that. When you are involved in a big conservation project, for decades they tried to remove the dams from the Elwha River in Olympic National Park. They were put in before it became a national park, and they just couldn't get rid of them. There were dams in the park, and eventually they came down. And for some park rangers, that was the best day of their career when they got to be there on the day the dams came down. So sometimes it's a big event like that.
How about have you ever felt unsafe on the job? And I guess putting aside having to put hands on somebody, have you ever had any issues with wildlife or anything else that might cause an unsafe feeling?
Well, here's the thing. We were trained so well that I was never in a situation with a person where I felt unsafe because I knew I could handle it because I had been so well trained. And if I needed it, it was not hard to get back up to be there with me. So people never made me feel unsafe. We were just that well trained. And as far as wildlife, it the you can always count on wildlife to do what wildlife is going to do. It's people that are really unpredictable. The most dangerous situation I had with any wildlife was with a squirrel of all things. So it's not like bears or cougars or wolves or anything are going to be an issue.
Okay, well, my deck has a bunch of squirrels on it right now. What happened?
This is what we think led to this, but sometimes people have squirrels as pets and they make terrible pets and then they don't know what to do with them and they let them go in a park. That's the short setup. And then we had a squirrel that bit a park visitor because what we think the squirrel wanted fed. And so it climbed onto the park visitor, ended up biting them in the wrist. And then I arrived on scene to deal with the park visitor that got bit, and the squirrel came back and 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 attacked me. It was a really hot day, so I was wearing shorts, and the squirrel jumped on me and climbed up my leg into my shorts. And the end result was that the squirrel did not live after. Yeah, so it was a bad incident. Yeah, but I've never been worried that a bear was going to get me.
Hmm. I'm assuming the person had to have rabies shots just in case for that squirrel.
Luckily, in Washington state, the only animal with rabies is bats. So no
Oh
concerns
wow.
about that, about
Good,
rabies.
good, good,
Yeah.
good, good. And bears, what do you have bears up there?
We have black bear in Washington state. There have been some cases of grizzly bear coming back on their own, just crossing the border. I'm not up near Mount Baker. I think they're anticipating grizzly bears to establish themselves again, but so far it hasn't happened. But just black bear is all we have here. I've had many grizzly bear run-ins in Glacier National Park and Yellowstone National Park, but there's nothing we have to worry about here in Washington.
Would you say has the job affected you in any way?
But yeah, it definitely has. I mean, you can't work a wonderful job like that and not have long lasting effects. I mean, I still tell people I'm a park ranger when I'm not anymore, but it's one of those things where once you've done it, you're just always a park ranger. In a way, you're just always a
Yeah,
park ranger. You
like a
you
marine.
never get over stopping to watch birds or telling stories or blurting out facts that people may or may not have asked for when you see it. But also the wonderful thing, like I learned interpretation as a park ranger, which I still use all the time, whether it's when I have a podcast or I'm on stage or just telling a story. I use what I learned on how to be an interpreter as a park ranger. So there's so many elements of what I learned as a ranger that are still with me.
Nice. Besides the drowning, is there any person or situation that you still think about today from being a park ranger?
Yeah, yes, in from good situations, and there's even one bad situation I still, all these years later, think of. Good situations or people in good scenario situations that I think of, like my first mentor in parks, Jack Hart. I never would have been a successful park ranger had he not taken me under his wing and just shown me. Because remember, I was a financial analyst. My job was to measure interest rate risk. That's what I did one week. The very next week, I'm a park ranger. Without Jack Hart taking me under his wing, it would have been so hard to figure out what in the world I was doing. So he definitely has a lot of credit. I've There's a couple other park rangers that mentored me. And then as bad situations there, I remember there was a young lady drove her car off of a cliff, and luckily it hit a tree before it went into the river, and it was a quite the ordeal to save her life. Me and the fire department were involved, and we had to get her back up the cliff, and she did it trying to take her own life, drove off the cliff. And I've always wondered, even now, I've always wondered, did with so many people involved in saving her life, did that impact her enough where she like did she go on to a normal life after that or
Yeah.
not? Like I've always wondered what happened to her. And I'll never know, but that's one that has always stuck with me.
All right. Well, thank you, Jack Hart, for.
Yeah, Jack is a great guy.
I think you probably have already answered this one, but is there anything cool or enjoyable about the career that surprised you? You might call it a Betty. You know what I mean? To the job.
I think the one of the things that delighted me the most that I didn't see coming was how many people always wanted to be a park ranger. Because if you're not a park ranger, that's not something that comes up in conversation. You're probably not sitting around with a buddy and he says, "You know, I always wanted to be a park ranger." It just doesn't come up. But when you are a park ranger, people always tell you, "I always wanted to be a park ranger." And kids just want to come and meet you because you're a park ranger. When I was a financial analyst, nobody ever said, "I always wanted to be a financial analyst," and it just didn't work out. So that is one of the really unique things about being a park ranger is the you can be having a bad day, things just aren't going your way, and someone will come up and tell you, "I always wanted to do what you do, and it just didn't work out. And man, it's so great you're out here doing this." And that'll turn your day around.
No, it sounds uplifting. Like you said, you could be having a bad day and someone saying, I wish I was able to do what you do. I mean, that would make my day, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. It does. It
Uh,
does.
How about your peers, coworkers? I don't know what you would call them. Fun, competitive. What was that like?
Well, one thing to keep in mind that park rangers are people. They're coworkers just like you would have coworkers. Some of them are fantastic and some of them not. And you'll always have that no matter your role. Now, the difference is that the peers you have as a park ranger probably love parks, they love conservation, and you always have that in common. How many people go to work every day knowing everyone else here is trying to accomplish the same thing I am? It's just not that common. And I think that's one of the great things about being a park ranger is the majority of park rangers are fantastic, just great people, because I think it's the type of career that just attracts a certain type of people. And it just they love the outdoors, they love people, because if you didn't like those two things, you probably wouldn't be a park ranger. Now, there are some people in parks that got in the field because they love biology or botany or something like that, and they like plants more than they like people. Yeah, you'll have that in parks. It's just a great bunch of people, so much fun, and you build such good camaraderie because look at what you're doing together. It's not often you're sitting at a table together. You're riding in a truck together, you're hiking trails together, you're cutting down trees together, you're burning brush together. You and even tough law enforcement situations, you end up bonding a little bit during things like that. So usually park rangers end up with a really tight bond with each other. And once one of you leaves the park, you end up staying in touch and still having a great group. So yes, I said at park rangers are people. You'll like some, you won't like others. But on balance, park rangers are fantastic. And because of how you work together, you quite often end up with really strong bonds with your coworkers, stronger than any other job I've had.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. So here's some questions from previous guests. Amy Weldon is a science communication writer, and she wants to ask you, beyond forestry, what kinds of backgrounds do rangers usually have? And do many people just join to escape their desk job?
That's an interesting question because I don't know these numbers. I'm gonna make it up. Like 80% can be forestry, biology, parks and recreation, things like that. What you would expect. And then 20% are just out there. And you would say, I didn't see that coming. My bachelor's degrees are in finance and marketing, and I was a park ranger. I've met others that had degrees in journalism and just on and on. And it's because at some point, the you if they're like me, realize this what I'm doing isn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And if I'm true to myself, gosh, I really want to be a park ranger. And so you pursue it. And that's how you get the people that don't have the background you would expect. But the majority have a study in natural sciences of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And Amy also asks, how much history are you required to learn, such as the are you able to talk about the Civilian Conservation Corps or infrastructure and that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know if I would say required is there, except you're going to have to answer questions a lot. One of the parks I was at had a big presence of the Civilian Conservation Corps. A lot of structures were built by the civilian. I even got to live in a house built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was fantastic. The park manager in a situation like that might say, read these books because you're going to get these questions. But that doesn't usually happen. Park rangers will take it upon themselves to say, okay, I need to learn the history of the park. I need to learn the natural history of the park. But I have had it at parks where the manager has said every park ranger has to give so many interpretive talks per summer because we're going to schedule them, we're going to put them on the calendar, and we're not going to rely only on the ones that love interpretation to be the only ones that have to do this. And it's up to you to come up with your relevant topic to the park and the people who are here and give that talk. So that's how you either have to come up with, well, what is it going to be about? Now, I've seen a lot of topics from search and rescue to the role of fire in the park to the life cycle of salmon. Here are the trees in the park. This is what park rangers do. But then this is where you find out what individual park rangers are really interested in, because then you'll have some that do history. They'll tell stories about the Civilian Conservation Corps or how the park got to be what it is, or maybe a story of someone who played a big role in the park. So it's quite often though, if I take parks as a whole, most parks have a master interpretive plan to say, when we do interpretation, this is the stories we're going to tell, or these are the big events we want to talk about. And then it's up to the park ranger or the interpreter to select out, okay, this is the story I'm going to tell. This is how I'm going to tell it.
Okay, so this has been in the news recently. This is a bison toss. Any comments on this?
Well, this is what you get when things start to trend on social media, I guess, because it happens in places as well. So let me start there and then we'll work our way towards bison. Is if a park has a spot that gets hot on social media, then everybody wants to go to that spot to take a picture. And then it becomes a resource management challenge. Well, the same happens here is people want to get a selfie in front of a bison, and it happens with elk too, but bison are yeah, bison are an issue because they are massive. And if you're from the city, the comedian Orlando Leyba referred to bison as a bougie cow. And so it kind of does look like a bougie cow. And you're not all that scared of posing for a picture with a cow. And so someone will approach a bison as if it's a bougie cow and pose for a picture. And bison are massive and as fast as a horse. And the males in particular have tempers. And if all of a sudden they think, gosh, I've been harassed all day long and I've had it, that's when you get the bison toss. Is they'll say, I've had it. I don't want any more. And it is not the bison's fault. The bison itself is not dangerous. It's just people almost, this is not entirely true, but mostly true. Anytime someone is injured by an animal in a park, with big exceptions, of course, but situations like that, it's always the person doing something they shouldn't have done. And most animal hurting humans in parks is someone did something they shouldn't have done. There are exceptions, of course, but most of them are like that. Yellowstone, I feel so bad for the park superintendent and the rangers that have to deal with that because it's nonstop. It's that is nonstop in the park. People posing for pictures with bison. There was a situation maybe 3 or 4 years ago where someone saw a bison calf the side of the road. You know, bison calves will wander. They're with the herd, but they'll wander. Maybe the mother was around the corner and they thought, oh no, a lost bison calf. And they picked it up and put it in their car and took it to a park ranger. There's no way that bison calf is going to survive after that because they won't, the herd won't take it back. So it's, it's just nonstop. And it can be frustrating if you're in parks and you always have to deal with that. That's why interpretation is so powerful. Enforcement, yes, you need enforcement, but interpretation is the only way people are going to learn what's going on. Don't approach them. This is what's going on. And but it also how unique that you can be in a place like Yellowstone with a herd of wild bison just roaming around. And if you don't do anything dumb, it can be one of the most spectacular experiences you'll have to watch bison, an animal that big, pass right by you. It's pretty cool. If you're going to get out and try and get a picture with them, you might end up getting tossed. But if you just watch, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Tell us about the capacity of the park. Is there a certain amount, is there a maximum number of humans? How do you handle that? Especially in maybe in particular areas. How does that go down?
Well, the National Park Service has really dealt with this. It became a bigger problem in 2020 when people couldn't do anything in public. So what do? You go to your park because the parks were still open, and visitation rose by 30 to 70%, depending on where you were. So that creates issues, and National Park Service has dealt with it in many ways, from having to have reservations, like Glacier National Park. For several years, you had to have a reservation to drive going to the Sun Road. That's one way it's been dealt with, is just reservations to get in. I know of I forget the state, but there's one state that had such a popular hiking trail that it was way over capacity. So much so that how could you possibly have a good time on this trail? And they implemented a permit system, and the permits only cost $1, but they allowed, let's say, 1,000 hikers a day, where they were getting like 4,000 a day. And when you have that, nobody's having a good time. Even Zion National Park, one of the most popular hikes is Angel's Landing. And there's one particular part of it that's very dangerous. And I just saw an article that just this past week, somebody died because they fell and on that part. Well, you cannot have hundreds of people trying to do that dangerous part of the hike at the same time. So they had to implement a permit system. And Zion also, the visitation got so high that they had to say no cars during these months. You park outside and we shuttle you in, and then we have shuttles that throughout. So each park and park system has to deal with it in their own way. Parks are more popular now than they've ever been because the United States has done a phenomenal job at parks. We do parks very well here, and our country loves them and wants to get out and see what's out there, as they should. But it also does create a problem when everyone wants to go to the park. And so it feels not right to have to put permits in just to go visit parks, but what else are you going to do? Otherwise, it ruins the experience for everybody. It ruins the resource because it gets overrun. And I don't know if any park has come up with the right answer, but they're trying things in search of the right answer for the resource, for the park, the amount of park staff, and the amount of park visitors. So it's a question that we'll be searching for the answer for a while, I'm sure.
Okay. Um, how about hot take? Do you have any hot take, as in you believe something that a lot of other park rangers might disagree with?
Sometimes they'll talk about the well-rounded ranger, that a park ranger needs to be able to do everything. And I just think maybe those days are past. That I think you're better off if you specialize in something. If you are great at telling stories, put all you can into being the best interpreter that you can. And then as a park manager or superintendent, if you've got a great storyteller, well, don't make him change oil in the trucks. Don't make him do maintenance. Let that fella tell his stories, because the visitors are going to benefit the most. I think that's it. I mean, try to specialize in something, forget about being a well-rounded ranger. And then as a park superintendent or manager, you can collect the best pieces that way, rather than a team of 10 well-rounded generalized rangers. Maybe you have a team of 10 people who are the absolute best at their one particular thing. That's going to be an all-star team.
I agree with your hot take, 100%.
All right.
What is the boss of a park ranger? Who did you report to? How did they affect your life in how you did the job?
There's always the top and then there's layers. So it depends on where you are. That there's the park manager or superintendent. Different park systems use one or the other title. And then depending on the size of the park, there can be several layers between that and the ranger out on foot patrol in the campground. So a small park, there might be no layers. A big park, well, there can be three layers before the superintendent. And you're the unique thing about being a park ranger is it very well could be that your supervisor is your coworker, your supervisor, and your neighbor. What a unique situation that is. Can you imagine if you worked at, I don't know, let's go back to when I was a banker. What if my boss, who at the time was the senior vice president of the treasury department, I would see him at work, but what if we also lived within sight of each other? So he's my neighbor, so he sees me when I'm recreating, and is in a sense my landlord, because if you're the park manager, you're responsible for the park houses. So your supervisor can be your supervisor, your landlord, your neighbor, and it's like you can never get away. But that's not usually a bad thing, but just that gives you the sense of the type of unique living, working relationships that park rangers can end up having with each other.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you had a pleasant experience, but it also sounds like if your boss was an asshole, that would be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, there's stories out there of park managers, superintendents, like being at their house watching with binoculars to see what staff are doing. And like, who can feel safe at their job, really, knowing, gosh, he could be up watching us with binoculars right now?
Sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. If somebody said they wanted to do this job, a young person, old person, whatever, and they came to you and said, "Hey, I want to be a park ranger," what would you tell them to do? What's the path?
Well, I would do 2 things at the same time. I would make sure you are heading down the right educational path, natural sciences of some sort. So, whatever agency you wanna be with, you could want Ohio State Parks, you could want national parks or Jefferson County parks. Find out what you need and then make sure you're on the right path educationally. Also, volunteer at a local park. That does a few things for you. It gives you experience that you can then talk about in your interviews. It gives you experience to find out, do I really like this? And it gives you experience with people who can then endorse you when you go for that job. And that's something you can do right now is start volunteering and let it be known as you volunteer. I really want to be a park ranger. So can I do ride-alongs? Can I do work on an interpretive project? Can I do a maintenance project? You can build quite a good base of things to talk about during your interviews just by volunteering.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Yeah. Let's suppose someone's done being a park ranger. What other jobs might it lead to in real life?
Well, I've seen it lead to law enforcement officer because if you were a law enforcement ranger, that's an easy transition. I've seen it lead to firefighter, school teacher. I've seen former park rangers end up being authors. I mean, it builds up such a good resume of management, leadership, customer service. You've dealt with crisis, you've dealt with crowds, you've dealt with bad weather, and you've probably designed programs. You've done so much as a park ranger that if you tell it the right way, I think it sets you up for anything else you want to do. It is not a job that pigeonholes you into this is all I can do because your experiences are so broad. And I know I was just pushing back on the idea of well-rounded ranger, but your experiences are so broad. You've done a little bit of everything and you've done a lot of some certain things that are desirable anywhere. The people skills, the customer service, the project management that I feel like it can take you anywhere you want to go as long as you can tell it the right way.
Let's suppose someone gets hired. What is something you would definitely tell them? Definitely do this or definitely don't do this.
I would, when you first start as a ranger, I would spend your first 30, 60, 90 days just soaking it in. Do a ride along with every other park ranger if you can. Hang out with the maintenance guy, ask questions, watch what's going on. The park already has a vibe, it already has a culture. There's already the way they do things around here. And yeah, they'll tell you this is how things happen, but find out how things really happen and just get the feel for this. Okay, this is how it works around here. This is who does what. This is who I go to if I have a problem. Or I want to improve my interpretive talk. Well, I'm going to go talk to Joseph. I need to understand, gosh, I don't feel I'm writing tickets the right way. I need to improve on that. Max the guy to go talk to. Just understand who's doing what in the park. What are they an expert in? What can you help? Eventually you'll get to the point where you're contributing a lot. But in the beginning stages, just soak it in, figure out what's going on. And the one of the best things I ever pieces of advice I ever got when I started, Jack Hart, who we talked about earlier, he said, "Hey, take your first couple of days and go hike the trails because if you're going to be a good ranger here, you have to fall in love with the park. And the only way you're going to do that is to spend time with the park. So just consider it your job to go hike the trails for a couple of days."
And they would pay someone to do that?
But yeah, that was it. I would just hike the trails and I'd come back with questions. Why does this sign say this?
No, that's fantastic.
Why? Yeah, why are we doing it this way? It really helped me learn what was going on in the park.
Yeah. Very that's really cool. While you were a park ranger, if you had won the lottery, do you quit? Do you keep doing it? What do you think?
My goodness, I don't know. I maybe I quit and then I just volunteer and do the things I only want to do because I loved it. As you rise up, though, you do less of the reason you became a park ranger. There's more time
Mm.
at a desk. There's more paperwork. Supervising people has its own problems. But my goodness, those early days, being a campground ranger, yeah, the hours you work are really lousy, but you're out doing why you became a park ranger. Riding my bike all day and patrolling that way, phenomenal. So maybe I win the lottery and I just go all the way back down to the entry level ranger jobs because they don't pay what they do after you start getting promotions, but most likely that's why you became a park ranger. So maybe I win the lottery and then just go back to riding my bike and take a job like that.
What's the most important thing that we haven't talked about? Anything we missed?
It's worthwhile remembering what parks contribute to society and what park rangers do because we are going through a current time where park staff is getting cut really harshly. Some parks are in danger of not being parks anymore. I think that's always a good conversation to talk about the even the economic impact that parks have on communities around them because the national park in St. Louis, does it contribute? I know that the National Park Service made a big push for urban presence of the National Park Service, but the park in St. Louis doesn't contribute to the local community the way Zion does to the communities around, or the Grand Canyon, or even state parks. It's just such a tremendous economic impact that parks have on the communities they're in. And I think that's always worth discussing, that we go to parks for our benefit, and hopefully you do get a lot of benefit out of being at a park, but it goes so much deeper than that, the importance of parks, and therefore the importance of park rangers.
I'd like you to clarify. So when you say the effect of, let's say Zion to the surrounding area,
Mhm.
you're not talking about necessarily property values, right? Because
No.
obviously it helps that. What are you talking about? How does it impact the local community?
Well, so let's say you fly to Vegas and go spend a week at Zion National Park. Well, you're either going to spend money at the park, at the visitor center, at the lodge, but you're also going to spend, I think the town right outside of Zion is Springdale. Well, you're going to go shop at the grocery store in Springdale. You're going to eat at the restaurants in Springdale. And studies show that when money is brought from outside a community into a community, it recirculates 3 to 7 times. So if you buy something at the grocery store, then that dollar is then used on wages, or the owner goes out to dinner. So for if you go into the town and spend $100, the economic impact is $300 to $700 because your money recirculates 3 to 7 times in the community. So
I've
these
never heard
small
that
towns,
before.
the small
That's
towns that have
fascinating.
parks, it just is it is such a big boost. Now, yes, they get tired of tourists during tourist season because it is a lot, but they wouldn't survive the way they do without it.
That's interesting. Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. We're on the speed round now. Now,
All right.
just want to let you know, the speed round is hit or miss. If it doesn't go well, it's not your fault. I promise. So basically, I'm going to just say some words that I found about your job on the internet, and then you tell me anything. You say anything you want. You hate it, you love it. You could talk for a little bit about it, or you whatever. Say anything you want.
Mhm.
Whatever comes to
All
mind.
right.
You ready? The flat hat.
Well, the flat hat, it is iconic. Most the dirty secret, most park rangers hate wearing it, but all of them should.
Bear jams.
Bear bear jams. My
So I
goodness.
got now. Let me just make sure we're on the right page here. I've
Mhm.
got gridlock traffic caused by tourists stopping to see a bear.
Yeah. When you said bear jam, I knew exactly what you were talking about. And if you've ever been to Yellowstone, you've been in a bear jam, and park rangers by the end of the season and you've broken up your 317th bear jam, yeah, they get tired of it. But also I can't blame the tourists. It is frustrating, but you can't blame the tourists. Could be the only time they've ever seen a bear. So yeah, they happen. They're frustrating for the ranger. They're frustrating when you're stuck in them, but I understand.
All right. Social trails. which are damaging unofficial paths made by visitors trampling vegetation.
Yeah, there's almost nothing you can do about it, but parks are really good about using unassuming features to influence what you do. Kind of like Disney at Disney World. They use
It's like a
instead of putting
funnel.
signs up, they'll use features, rocks,
Mm.
to try to make it look like, oh, this is just how it is, but really we're trying to influence your behavior. Yeah. They're a problem. Social trails are a problem, but the less signs you can use, the better.
Nice. All right. The concept of leave no trace.
Leave no trace is a great thing, and that turns to interpretation and park staff being able to educate on leave no trace. That if uh, everyone took a rock or walked a, that's how social trails come. People don't understand leave no trace, and enough people cut through right here, and now you've got a social trail. So leave no trace is great.
Windshield rangers, which are rangers who rarely leave their patrol vehicles.
It happens. Not a fan. Get out on foot.
Prescribed burns.
They're a good thing. A good thing, especially in parks that. I mean, look at what happened in Yellowstone in that massive fire. Of you don't let burns happen for a long, long time, and then once they happen, they're really bad. So prescribed burns help with that. So yeah, they're in most cases they're good.
Backcountry permits.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I know some hikers don't like them, but if you're camping in the backcountry, it's good that the park staff know you're there so they can come looking for you if you don't show back up.
All right. Resource protection.
Thumbs up. That's one of the main reasons we're there as park rangers.
Concessionaires. Private companies that run lodges and gift shops.
Yeah, it's needed. The parks does not have the capacity or the expertise to run most of that on their own.
All right. That's the end of the speed round. Great job,
All
Jody.
right.
I'm calling this one a success. We're almost done here. Final advice, any final secret of being a park ranger, anything you want to tell us?
Most park rangers just love what they do, and I will say one of the questions I get a lot. This will be not a secret, but it's worth saying. People will say, "What does a park ranger do for vacation?" It makes sense, right? You work in a park. What are you going to do for vacation? I usually say, "Oh, we go to the mall." But that's not true. Park rangers just go to another park for vacation. You leave your park and you go to a different park for vacation. And that just shows how much park rangers love what we do. That when it's time to go on a vacation, we just go to someone else's job and walk around.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks for being on Tales from the Ship, Jody Maberry. You've been awesome,
All
man.
right. Thank you so much. This was a great talk.